weekend breaks, gaps between shifts, the 8-hour day, the minimum wage, an end to child labour, equal pay, the NHS, the welfare state and health and safety are all things that were won by trade unionists and workers organising in their workplaces and in their communities against, corrupt governments and bosses, against the rich bankers fighting for decent pay and decent conditions. And I think today, my generation, the young generation, are going to have to start moving to do the same and organise, because all of those things are now under attack. I'm one of the organisers for Youth Fight for Jobs in London, and I'm more involved in the Sick of Your Boss side of the campaign, trying to organise young underemployed people alongside unemployed people to fight for better conditions within their workplaces and encourage a new generation of workers into the trade union movement. And I think over this weekend we've already heard how working people have fought for a number of changes within society and how they are now being dismantled, such as the session this morning around the NHS and how it's been ripped apart. And I think that's one of the most important wins that we've seen in the last century sort of thing in Britain. And so to be seeing that also dismantled has a big impact on people around the country, and really shows that it's now that young people have to move into action and start organising in the same way that those benefits were won in the first place, and taking on the same traditions of struggle and organising within their workplaces. And to do this, within a workplace, trade unionists and trade unions need hardened organisers, individuals who know how to build the trade union movement within their workplaces, who are going to support the other staff and pull them together against attacks on conditions and against bullying managers and zero-hour contracts. And they are the backbone of the trade unions, and they are what gives trade unions their strength. And I think a recent example of that is the big TUC demo in Manchester over the NHS attacks, because the TUC had organised that, but it was your branch secretaries in the trade unions, it was the organisers in the workplaces. They did all the groundwork, getting people to go up, getting people to get organised themselves, and are doing the fighting on an everyday level. And this session is about encouraging a new generation of those organisers and about talking about our experience as those organisers within the workplace. And on a wider level, the trade unions in this country represent 6 million workers in Britain today, and they play the role of supporting one another in their own disputes and working together wherever possible to form more effective action. And my example of that was with Unite and UCU and Unison just this week. But the thing is, zero-hour contracts aren't just in one area, and they're not just something that's going to affect one trade union. They affect 5.5 million workers across Britain, and those workers are in all trade unions at all levels across a number of different sectors. So a real fight back on zero-hour contracts means a united fight back of all those trade unions together, fighting back against the majority of austerity, because that is why those sorts of contracts are now being used. And I think the other thing that we've got to say in this session, because it's not just about zero-hour contracts, it's about pulling unemployed people into that movement as well, into a united fight back against all the attacks of austerity alongside the attacks on working conditions. And the reason it's so important for the trade unions to take up the attacks of austerity is not just because they're nice people and they're angry about the effects things like the bedroom tax and zero-hour contracts are going to have, but because their members are benefit claimants themselves, their members are losing their jobs, Their friends and families are people who claim benefits and need the support of the state, of the welfare state, the NHS, and that is why they need to come together to save those services. 40% of DWP staff who are going to be implementing universal credit and everything that goes with that are also going to be receiving it. And so if we want to lead a proper fight back against those sorts of attacks on people in society, we have to completely link up with the workers who are being affected by them as well. And that is why it's the responsibility of the trade unions to be leading a fight back against 0 hours and against austerity, and pulling in organisations like Youth Fight for Jobs, who would always bring and will always bring solidarity to striking workers, but also want to play a role in organising unemployed people alongside employed to be part of the movement against cuts too. But I think the title of this session as well is about the role of a organiser for a trade union in the workplace. And I think that that's because the starting point of a campaign, an anti-cuts campaign, has always been and will always be the trade union organisers within a workplace, or the trade union members who see something wrong, see their services being attacked, see their own jobs under threat, and are going to start the fight back against those sorts of attacks. And as a young person previously on a 0-hour contracts, organising within my own workplace, and we did have some minimal gains within that, I think is not only like a really enjoyable experience when you finally get something changed, even if it's sort of small in the grand scheme of the attacks we're facing in society today, but also have an extremely important impact on the young people around me who had previously been unorganised, and were seeing that if they did sort of work together, they could be part of a fight back, and they could change things for themselves, but also be part of a movement that was going to change things for others as well. And I think that's why we've had a whole session dedicated to talking about the role of a trade union rep, of an organiser within a workplace at this event, is because they are the most important layer of the trade unions getting out there and getting stuck in to workplaces, trying to encourage young people to join trade unions. And this is a forum for anyone who's got experience like that to come forward and explain how they've organised, when they've organised, how it went. I think we're better and stronger if we can learn from each other's successes and also difficulties. But it's also about talking about whether we've been able to impact the trade union movement more widely. Have you been able to impact your branch, get them to really take seriously encouraging new young workers into the trade union? Have you been able to get a group like in London that we've got now, who are going round to supermarkets and shopping centres, call centres, with the sick of your boss material to really encourage young people to join whatever relevant trade union they could, but if they're not quite ready for that, get involved in a campaign and with other young people who are thinking the same and understand there's something, it's time to start a fight back. But yeah, and anyone who's had a win at work, this is the place where we want to hear about it and we want to support one another in those progressions. At my old workplace, we would finish at 2 a.m. and start a new shift at 9 a.m, giving us 5 hours sleep, completely illegal, something that was fought for, a decent gap between shifts. We would work from 9 a.m. till 5 without a single break or anything to eat. We were bullied, insulted by our management, told we were the lowest of the low, and they admitted the reason they used 0-hour contracts was so that when we were rude, when we were complained, when anything like that happened, they said, well, that's so that we can cut your hours next week, and that is how we use your hours. They're a punishment, as a punishment if you misbehave. And to work in a place like that with one person in a trade union, but then to have a discussion with the staff, realised that we had a common problem and that we weren't to blame ourselves, it was because we were understaffed, poorly treated, and that we didn't get enough time off and breaks, and those were why we were struggling to get by and not being able to work well together, understanding that that wasn't our fault and that was management's fault, and encouraging a group of 10, 20-year-olds to call a meeting with management and say that we had enough was enough and we wanted to see changes, and to take that to management as one, to use our collective strength even in a small workplace, terrified them into making big temporary changes in my workplace. And it's sad to say that those changes haven't stuck, but I think that's true of everything we win. Even the NHS wasn't forever, was something that we would carry on having to fight for, would always be under attack. But I think that in my workplace it is more obvious now than ever that if I had been able to get more people within the trade union, we would have had that constant threat of being organised to hold over their heads and really been able to keep the gains that we'd made and stop them from being reversed. And that is the role of a collective organisation like a trade union. The bigger and stronger that young people can make them within their workplaces is going to make them better still and more able to fight against zero-hour contracts and against the huge attacks happening to young workers at the moment. And I think it's very important that people leave this session today with tips and advice on how you organise, but ultimately with the aim of going out and organising a new generation of trade unionists, of Youth Fight for Jobs campaigners, to defend the right for a break, for a decent contract, and to end 0 hours. And I just wanted to end with a plug that the next big day of action for Youth Fight for Jobs is the 5th of November, and it's a big day of action and disobedience for a number of people. And so in London we're going to be organising a demonstration outside, probably inside CBI, Tottenham Court Road at 3 p.m. But it'd be brilliant if other people of similar actions organise. They can talk about them here. We can help you make better plans, more plans on how we're going to take it to the bosses and say enough is enough. We're not going to be a lost generation. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. I think one of the key things Helen identified in her contribution is the absolutely crucial role of trade unions in organising against the usage of zero-hour contracts, a form of hiring that bosses like to implement on us that many of us thought had died off in our grandparents' generation. And to that end, how the unions can organise against that, I'd like to invite Chris from the PCS union to say a few words.
Well, first of all, thanks for the invite and the opportunity to speak at this session. I suppose many of the speakers would make the same claim, but I don't think it's an exaggeration to say if we're serious about rebuilding the trade union movement and rebuilding trade union power, this is arguably one of the most important sessions, because it is a reflection of the fact that over the last 30 years there has been a concerted move from the Reagan-Thatcher era to maximise the profitability of investments, and the major obstacle to achieving that, of course, is organised labour. We saw it in the United States, we saw it in the UK. We now stand, as we all, I think, are aware, confronted with a government that is looking to push back and remove all of the gains that are won in the post-war years. I make an incidental point that there's a good film, Ken Loach's Spirit of 45, which gives you an indication of the expectations that arose from that generation who fought in the Second World War. But there's actually another film by Ken Loach that never made it onto the television. He was commissioned by Central Television to do a series of documentaries about trade unions, and he did 4 episodes under the title of Questions of Leadership, and they never saw the light of day. It was spiked by Central Television, spiked in fact by Melvin Bragg was involved in it as well. But the reason it was spiked is because it, as the name would imply, it talked about the crucial role of trade union leadership, and it highlighted from the early days of Thatcher how the trade union leadership deliberately kept the dockers strike, the NHS strike, the steel strike, a whole number of disputes, and of course each individual major dispute went down to defeat, and it was part of a concerted strategy. So my point here, the opening point I'm making, is that 0 hours contracts and the casualisation of the workplace is a consequence of the neoliberal agenda, and the reason why they're in a position to push so far ahead is because the capitalist class, UK and internationally, were in a position to inflict a number of important defeats, where, to use the expression, the frontier of control of trade union organisation in every workplace, in every sector, in every industry, has been pushed back. And there was a saying in the national minority movement in the 30s, set up by the Communist Party, used to say that the employer's objective is that they want the status of the man at the factory gate to determine the status of the man at the factory bench. And the reason I mention that is, of course, is that in many ways encapsulates exactly what the capitalist class are now seeking to do with 0 hour contracts. At a time of mass unemployment, an attack on the benefit system, the status of the unemployed, the status of those on the most casual and insecure contracts becomes a vehicle for attacking what other rights and collective bargaining rights workers enjoy. Now, I think we've already seen references being made to the Houari dispute. Again, what's particularly telling is the outcome of that, the focus on that particular issue, and it's drawn massive attention, as we know, 5.5 million workers on 0 hour contracts, with all the insecurity and the poverty conditions that creates. So, I mean, what I wanted to focus on is a number of areas. I mean, we talked about the Houari dispute, but of course, this is not confined to a few areas of the trade union movement. It's not confined to a few bargaining areas within the PCS. All departments, if you use PCS as an example, there's two most obvious areas where there's an extensive use of 0 hour contracts. One is the culture sector, which is, that's what we call it, it's our bargaining area that tries to encapsulate trade union organisation in all the museums and galleries, where PCS is with Prospect, but we're in fact numerically, and I would argue in terms of industrial influence, of course, PCS is the most important. And we're just about to launch an important campaign with a protest outside a number of major museums and galleries in central London about the extensive use of 0 hour contracts. And of course, this is a trend that's developing in our commercial sector branches, where central government departments award contracts to a growing number of, the usual suspects, the Mighties, the G4S, the Carillion, etc., all of whom provide, the catering, the IT, the facilities, the security, and slowly but surely you're seeing that trend in all of the areas of the civil service where we're traditionally well organised. So my point again is that there's no area of the trade union movement, however strong we think our collective bargaining rights might be, that are immune or exempt from this particular threat. And that is why it is central to how the trade union movement should orientate. Because I would think one of the manifest failures, although of course it's important to recognise our latent power, 6.5 million workers still organised in the trade union movement, still the biggest voluntary organisation in Britain today, and if you look at the extent of its bargaining position, it still possesses massive bargaining power. But I think it's reasonable to say, if you track the decline in union membership from its high point of about 12.5 million in 1979, back down to 6.5 million, you'll see, obviously, you can ascribe that to the fact that there's a number of the traditional areas where unions were organised have been cut back, third of manufacturing cut under Thatcher. But the reason why that decline has gone on is because the trade union movement has not recognised adequately the trends that are taking place within employment, most notably the increasing casualisation and the nature of workers to whom the trade union movement should be reaching out. And that is why, one of the biggest criticisms of the British trade union movement, and we saw an increase in the last couple of years, but there's been another marginal decline. And until each individual union and the collective trade union movement recognises its obligations in terms of addressing zero-hour contracts. But of course, when you talk about casualisation, you're also talking about shocking conditions, you're talking about, enforcing the living wage. There's a whole host of other conditions around which the trade union movement should organise. So that has got to be a major message for every individual union. Now, the next point is that those who say it's too difficult, that's the traditional message you get from the trade union movement, that the process of subcontracting means that it's very, very difficult to identify who the workers are, to get a message to them, and all the rest of it. Now, of course, that's, I would argue, a complete cop-out. I mean, if we're serious about rebuilding the trade union movement, we need to orientate to young workers, we need to orientate to the millions of workers looking out, I would argue, for looking to the trade union movement to provide some sort of activity and some sort of meaningful protest, organisation and defence of workers' conditions. And unless we do that, we're not going to rebuild the trade union movement. Now, of course, we're dealing in the context of, I think many people, I think you'd be irrational not to feel a degree of frustration that since the Tory Liberal coalition came into power, that there hasn't been more action, there hasn't been more civil disobedience, there hasn't been more protest. But it's not that workers don't act irrationally. Workers make a very, very careful judgment about when you're going to commit to action, what risk you take. In this situation, many people are holding on to their jobs, they're holding on to their conditions, they're not going to act in a reckless way and jeopardise such matters. But that doesn't mean that people accept and welcome what's happening. There is a deep disaffection about what is happening, and I think the question is, how do we translate that massive sense of grievance in an organised way? You have to, of course, recognise the consequence of the 30th of November. We were on an upward trajectory, PCS at the heart of much of this, in the action taken with teaching unions on the 30th of June. 2.5 million workers took action on the 30th of November, a deliberate strategy by GMB, Unison and Sir Brendan Barber, subsequently knighted for his services, who argued that we should simply accept the pension proposals that were on the table a week before the action took place. We all know what that was about. That was intended to knock the stuffing out of the fight. It was intended to convey a message that common collective action can't win. Well, I don't think, whilst it has had a demoralising effect, the reality of life, of course, is that there's no respite. Dave Prentice may think that was a clever tactic, but look at what has happened in the NHS and local government. If anything, the government have accelerated their attacks, and if anything, of course, they are even more confident to support the actions of unscrupulous employers moving to ensure ever greater numbers of workers are on zero-hour contracts and the most insecure conditions in order to maximise their exploitation and make it as difficult for us to organise. Now, what I'm going to conclude on is that, of course, confronted with all of this, we're always dealing with the reality of life. Well, how is it too difficult? Well, I would say, I'll point to a number of examples. We've talked about Hovis, but another interesting campaign that's taking place that PCS has worked with closely in London is a cleaners campaign, largely around the living wage, but also about recognition. And it's linked up with PCS, it's also linked up with the RMT City Link campaign. Now, they largely organise migrant workers, young migrant workers. They've just won the living wage in the City of London Corporation. They've won a series of victories where employers, as a result of, invariably, rather than strike action, often it's been protests outside shops, of embarrassment, of occupations of buildings temporarily. And again, you've seen the latest action that they took. They're now targeting Lewis's, and I have to say I went along and supported them on that particular day. We went into Lewis's. Before I knew it, I've got the microphone thrust in my hand, was addressing thousands of shoppers in the perfume, near the perfume. but what was interesting about that is that the angle of attack, of course, is on Lewis's, this so-called ethical company, who subcontract the work to cleaners who are paid the minimum wage and on zero-hour contracts. And again, you know, they're deeply embarrassed. And again, what I'm saying is that that method, those tactics, are welcome people into the trade union movement, I would argue, because people join unions, not as some unions seem to think, for the right to pay subscriptions, to pay for the lovely Unison building, you know, just round the corner, or some of the other union headquarters. It isn't just about the right to pay subs. People ask the question, well, what will it do? It's only when unions speak and act and take action that people are inclined to join in the first place. And I think that's the lesson, and it's been the lesson in PCS. Every time we have a ballot, or every time we take action, in any individual sector, you get a surge of applications from the union. I mean, it's a provable statistical fact that when we take strike action, that we recruit into the union. And that poses a serious question about, first of all, how do you overcome the lack of confidence? Well, one way is we show that the action that I've referred to in the Cleaners campaign. We've got a protest action in the culture sector, as I said, on the 26th of November. They're working with this independent union as well, working with the RMT. Want to work with Youth Fight for Jobs as well, so that we can again systematically target those employers that are using these particular methods. And I reject, from my experience, I completely reject the idea that there isn't a receptive audience. People are there and can be recruited into the union. When the union, first of all, makes itself available, that's the first thing, so there needs to be a deliberate organisational turn towards these issues. But secondly, what is the message of the union? Well, the message in the culture sector is zero tolerance for 0-hour contracts. We're going to target all the major artistic and cultural institutions in the centre of London that draw in so much to the economy that, again, we're going to shame them. We're going to organise protests, we're going to leaflet, we're going to go into the museums and galleries, and we're going to shame them into paying it. And that is the way. I mean, in a place like, for example, one of the museums where we're well organised, a third of the membership now are cleaners as a result of the conscious turn towards recruiting that section of the workforce. And we're now poised to run this type of campaign, as I've said, across the whole of the culture, the whole of the culture sector. And I think that, of course, is the crucial question in front of us. You know, what in a practical sense? So I mean, to conclude, what I would say, if we're talking about making this a serious campaign, as Helen has said, and I think, you know, Ian made reference yesterday to people thinking that the young are an easy target. The attitude of Cameron with the threat to benefits of the under-25s, well, I think they're making a serious and hopefully, from their perspective, a tragic mistake, because I think it will unleash forces. There is the capacity to unleash massive political industrial forces if we organise properly through the campaigns that Helen was talking about, the Youth Fight for Jobs protest, targeting companies like Sport Direct, encouraging people, unemployed or anybody in any community. If you're not a union member and you're not sure what union to join, then join a Unite community branch. Let's turn these community branches. That is a really important initiative taken by Unite, and the doors are open. Of course, all of us, at whatever level of trade union activity, confront questions of how do you make the unions democratic, accountable. Well, there's no shortcut to that. You recruit people and you campaign within them, and you argue that unions should be open and democratic, and we argue that unions' purpose is to tap into the employment grievances of the workers and convert that grievance into a concerted programme of action. I mean, that's, of course, I mean, put in that way, it sounds relatively simple, but of course, all of the union bureaucracies that are nervous about such concepts are now under the biggest pressure they've ever been. And with the right work, we can build up that pressure. We need to open the doors to young workers into the trade union movement, but the crucial question is about what is the aim. As I said, it comes back to the question, what are the demands that we pose? What are the issues around which we organise? If you don't organise around issues, then you're not going to recruit people into the in the first place. So I think that's my basic point about how we should orientate. And I think it always comes back down to the question of confidence. Yes, there are big organisational questions, but I think we can also show and highlight a whole wave of achievements. And I'm finished with this, that You know, we have to overcome the concept that, you know, protest and struggle can't win. Well, you know, just think of a few recent victories, not really given a great deal of prominence or publicity in the media, but let's celebrate our victory. Let's celebrate the fact that Cameron was genuinely damaged over his plans to bomb Syria. Let's recognise that the construction workers, again, a rank and file campaign against the powerful contractors in the construction industry, organised rank and file activity, initially independent of the unions, but then drew Unite and the other unions into supporting them to fend off the attacks on the national agreement. How do you think the blacklisted workers secured a statement issued by the 5 or 6 major construction companies in Britain today to say that yes, we now acknowledge we've been blacklisting workers, we've been producing secret files? How on earth do you think we secured that without a massive campaign of rank and file activity that again has highlighted one of the biggest human rights scandals in Britain for decades? And again, it is a sign that they're now looking to offer compensation. We can now maximise the pressure, and we can open up this debate to expose the blacklisting and the targeting and victimisation of union reps that hasn't just been confined to the construction industry. In fact, when the Information Commissioner went into the Consultancy Association's office and originally got hold of 2,500 names of people that have been blacklisted in the construction sector for 30 years, I think that was only about 15-20% of the names. And for some inexplicable reason, the Information Commissioner took the names of the construction, and we'll never know probably the tens of thousands of names of workers in other sectors that were also blacklisted. But that is a campaign that shows how you can win. Even down, look at the attitude of Quadrilla, and now partly owned by Centrica, with their plans for fracking. You know, defeated even in a sleepy little Sussex village like Balcombe. That was the product of many, many people coming and protesting, and the thought of that company of these protests developing. So my point here is that militancy, that protests, trade union action can win. We've got to have the organisation, we've got to have the method, but we've also got to orientate to the campaigns that matter to workers today. 0-hour contracts, do so, living wage. There's a number of other areas that open up a massive vista, massive scope for us rebuilding the trade union movement, rebuilding it on the basis of a confident, militant outlook that is part, as I'm sure everybody in this room that believes it is part of a wider struggle for putting a socialist alternative. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. As Chris outlined, the so-called flexible employment models, including 0-hour contracts and agency working, what employers use is basically a euphemism to be being able to do whatever they like inside the workplace to whoever they like. And we've got somebody here from the RMT Justice for the 33 campaign who want to talk about a group of agency workers on the London Underground who are subject to terrible treatment by the bosses there.
Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. I've been invited here to just to represent our campaign, which is the best example of 0-hour contract. I've been invited from the Socialist Party, who has been supporting us from day one. When the Silver Link was transferred to London Underground, we used to cover Bakerloo line from 2007 from Queen's Park to Harrow and Winston, and on the district line from Kew Garden to Gunnersbury, doing the same role as permanent staff, working as a multifunction, working in a ticket office, maintaining the machines, working on the gates, doing the money, everything as a permanent staff, but with the minimum wages. I've been with the RMT union for nearly 5 years now, but I was not a really strong union member, to be honest, because I was working as anyone else. And when we had a problem, when in 2011 when a law agency worker regulation come out, they have London Underground, they have to give us the same rights as permanent staff. So, they have to give us the same wages, same holiday, same training, same. So even that London Underground didn't apply that agency regulation law. So what we've done, we asked the AMT to help us, and we went to an independent lawyer to fight for our rights. So what happened? London Underground, just before Christmas, they terminate our contracts, saying that they don't need us anymore. So what happened? We set up a campaign from December, so nearly a year now. We've been demonstrating outside LUL headquarters, outside Boris Johnson City Hall, everywhere. But nobody listened to us. And in February, for some reason, London Underground had a deal with RMT. So what they said we have to go through the recruitment process. So they said, you're going to jump the application process, and you're going to do the assessment, which is the role play, the exercise, the written exercise, and the interview. For some reason, most of the 33, which were 33 people, failed on most of them failed on the role play, most of them failed on the exercise, written exercise. Myself, I've been doing thousands of role plays, and I speak 4 languages. I speak French, Spanish, Italian, Arabic, plus English, which is 5. My role play was that the guy he asked me, he's at Kilburn Park, he's at Kilburn, sorry, and he want to go to Stratford. There's no Jubilee line between Stratford to Waterloo, so he need to go there as soon as he can. So what I've done, I told him to get the Jubilee line to Westminster and get a district line. Very simple. It's a district line to West Ham, and I gave him the map, and I gave him a glass of water if you want. And I kept apologizing for the line closure. London Underground trying to improve the service. For the inconvenience caused and that, and I gave him the map, and I told him the train is going to be in 2 minutes. And after that, they took me out and they said, you failed. I said, can you give me a reason why I failed this? And he said, we're going to send you what is it called? Feedback, yeah. About 4 weeks. Till now, I've never seen the feedback. Just recently, even that, we've been fighting. The RMT, they've done a very good job for us. Because we're not the only one as well, because there's cleaners, there's security guards on London Underground, there's so many agency workers working for London Underground for minimum wages. We've been doing London Underground. If I show you the pictures, we got the same if you see me with the uniform, you're going to say, that guy is a permanent guy. Permanent stuff, but I'm not. We had no travel pass to travel. We used to do bank holidays with no extra money. Overtime with the same wages, which is like we've done the Olympics. We didn't have any Olympics bonus. Most of the guys were working in High Winston. We witnessed so many suicide people. On the truck, we seen bodies on the truck. The permanent staff, they usually when there's a body on track, they give them like how do you call it, the counseling, yeah. But us, you come back the same day and do the same job as normal. When we fight for our rights, they said you're not good enough. How come we're not good enough? And we train before December. We train their DSMs, their big managers, to work on the ticket office, because that system, that machine, when it used to be Silverlink, Till now they still sell national rail ticket, plus the underground ticket. And they still, I mean, we're still fighting. We still got, we're still doing the demos at London Bridge at 8:30, and doing a walk to City Hall. We're not going to give up, to be honest, because we've been treated. Our slogan is used, abused, and refused by London Underground, and it's justice for the 33. I mean, the LMT, they're fighting for they're not against the workers, the Asian workers, but they're against the company who employ the agencies for minimum wages. I mean, this is it. I mean, out of the 33 people, we are black and ethnic minority. So, as you can see, we've been treated unfairly by London Underground. I mean, we're not trouble because they think we're troublemakers. We joined LMT, and we are troublemakers. We're not troublemakers. We've got kids. Most of us got kids, and we don't want to be signing on. We want to carry on. I've been paying tax for the last 17 years. I want to carry on paying tax, and the government. I think the government and London Underground, they're trying. What their policy now, they're trying to intimidate trade unions and trying to stop us fighting for our rights. So we're not giving up. Even it's going to take me to European community, I'm going to take my case to European community because I've been treated unfairly. I mean, we proved that we can do the job. We've been doing it for 5 years. We've done everything. I mean, if they go back, if they go back to their archives, to their history, we had 100% of mystery shoppers and 100% of customers' accommodation. So I don't know why the reason why they don't take us, because we joined the AMT. We're not. They think we're going to be union trade unions troublemakers. We're going to be making trouble to them, but we're not. We just want to carry on. We prove that we can do the job. We just want to carry on doing the job. And if you want to support us, we're still doing a demonstration every Monday at 8:30 City Hall. If you want to, feel free to support us. And just thank the LMT for helping us and take the Socialist Party to support us from day one. And justice for the 33.
Thank you. I think I speak for everybody here when we say everybody stands in absolute solidarity with your dispute. And I think I would urge everybody you can to join those demonstrations to support this group of workers who've been mistreated by London Underground and the administration there, and exert maximum pressure on the employers to do the right thing and give these people the jobs back, which they've more than proven they can do. I think do we have somebody from One Housing here?
There he is.
Yes. To speak, I'd like to invite yourself to speak about your own dispute.
Oh, thanks. Well, sorry for being late first. I mean, just to start with 0-hour contracts, I mean, a lot of people wouldn't know that the voluntary sector where I work is actually the most profligate user of them. 34% of all employers use them. We've had them for years. And as for Orgo, we've had a lot of people on 0 hours contracts joining our union. And the simple rule of thumb, just like our colleague from the RMT has just said, is like, one, we make sure we enforce the agency directive, make sure they're not undercutting the permanent staff, and the permanent staff appreciate that too. We include them in the collective bargaining. We also include them in like deals we make with management about redeployment. Because the biggest thing, the only reason that they still exist, even though they're getting the same pay, they're not eligible for 2P, and we're in such a competitive tendering, they want to keep those in. But as I say, if we can keep their conditions the same as the permanent staff, they will join the union as long as the union sees to be representing them as well. But as for One Housing itself, and it's not just agency, it's the permanent and everything. We're facing you know, across the sector, pay cuts, pay freezes, and all of those things. We've been on strike for 11 days recently. We're sort of coming towards the end of the dispute, maybe because we've delayed these pay cuts for 2 years. And all I can say, when we're talking about how to organise a union, and I did a speech in a complementary organisation a few weeks ago, and I was listening to what people were saying on the floor, and all what was being said here, you can do it through grievance and disciplinaries, you can do it through the law, you can do it through all sorts of ways, and they were all good examples doing it. But the main thing that we've learned through our dispute is that you have to do it all. And that includes industrial action downwards. Because basically what we're faced with in the sector, we have this attitude that, you know, we're a caring industry. Nobody's going to strike. We can't do it to our vulnerable clients. We can't do it in our sector because people aren't interested. We've proved that that's wrong. Yeah, we had a very easy ride over the last 10 years where we've, you know, it was an ethical workplace, an ethical sector where we always got that extra week's annual leave. We always got that extra bit of paternity leave. We got that extra bit of maternity pay and sick pay. It's gone. It is a normal workplace now. And we actually have to behave like normal workers. Unfortunately, we've got to the stage where they don't value our labour. But they started to value it more when we started to withdraw it. Yeah, particularly. And I mean, so again, you know, we had to make an example in our workplace. The 1-day strikes don't work. The 2-day strikes aren't working. You know, we had to do it 3 days and 3 days and 5 days. And actually, the best thing is that when we did it over the weekend, the management had to actually come out and do some of our jobs. And that actually brought the message home. Yeah, but again, anyone that says, you know, that you're going, that, you know, they're going to actually do the right thing by you, just forget it. You know, this is it. They're making us compete against each other. Even people in our own branch, in our own sector, they're making us compete to all be down on the living wage. And the sad thing about the living wage, even though some people don't get it, you can't live on it. So if we're going to protect what we've got, you know, we have to fight. Not only do we have to fight, we have to actually fight and coordinate together. There's no point in us doing it one housing group and sending it out of business, or doing it in St. Mungo's and sending it out of business. We have to make sure that we have minimum standards for all and end the competitive tendering. Because, you know, we are workers all doing the same job. And all I can say is, like, you know, if there's lessons to be learnt from that dispute, don't rule anything out. That's all I can say.